we had built this business where we would basically, as I mentioned, arbitrage. We would rent out apartments, we would guarantee the landlord rent, and then we would sublet them to business travelers and leisure travelers. It was very kind of a simple business. And that got completely destroyed by COVID. And we ended up basically going from this kind of profitable business to burning $100,000 a month. We had you can imagine what happens during COVID, but we had all these leases, nobody was traveling, and we still were on the hook to pay this rent. So we ended up basically finding ourselves in this extreme crisis where we went from having infinite runway to 3 months of runway. And we pivoted the entire company, and we basically built the early version of today's product, which is an AI leasing agent that helps kind of schedule tours that automates mundane work.
Shiv, welcome to the One Away Show.
Ryan, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. It's been awesome getting to know you. It's been fun.
I agree.
So, Shiv, what is the one away moment that you want to share with us today?
Yeah, I think what immediately comes to mind is just the first time an investor really trusted us and decided to invest in our company. It's a longer story, and we can get into it. But when we first, the first iteration of our company was totally different than what it is today. So the kind of impulse for building the first company, which was called Astro, was me and my co-founder, who I met in college at USC. We both studied engineering. We both kind of came from real estate backgrounds independently. So my mom, who was a real estate agent, my dad kind of worked in tech to eventually kind of leave tech and do real estate full time. And we decided to build a company shortly after graduating around real estate. We both had familiarity around it. And we wanted to build a business that basically provided passive income. So our whole thesis was, we love working and we want to work, but we don't want to be solely dependent on just having one income in one job. And we ended up connecting with a real estate investor who my parents knew, who had worked in tech, and in his mid-30s bought two 500 unit buildings in Redwood City, California, around in the mid 1990s. And you can imagine over 30 years what had happened to that area with tech and Facebook and all of these things, and ended up basically going from I don't know what the multiple was, but I think it increased 20x, right? So he ended up becoming a really close kind of mentor and advisor to us. And one day I had this crazy idea. Maybe this is the true one away moment. He was very spiritual, and he would meditate and do a lot of meditation. And I was slowly getting into kind of meditation as a tool as well. So I would go to his house and we would meditate. And during one of these meditation sessions, I had this crazy idea where one of us would basically become a leasing agent to work for this guy, because we wanted to learn the industry at the ground level. And I went back and talked to Kendrick, my co-founder, and pitched him this idea. And at the time he was working for his dad, and I was like, you could always come back if you wanted to. I somehow convinced him. I was like, maybe you should do it. And he ended up basically quitting his job, worked at SpaceX for a little bit, worked with his dad, and became a leasing agent for 9 months at this family-run property management company. And in those 9 months, we grew the business to about $2 million in revenue. So the business was, we would rent out apartments and turn them into Airbnbs. So every vacant unit he had, we would turn into an Airbnb. In 9 months, we grew that business. And because of our hustle, the owner actually ended up kind of writing a first check into our business that was $500,000. And that kind of gave us the freedom to leave our jobs and then continue to build the business. So I'd say that was probably the one away moment or transition period for my life.
Yeah. Wow. Well, first off, thanks for sharing that story. What a influential person that you crossed paths with. And I think props to you for saying, I want to learn kind of from the ground up and kind of put other aspirations on hold to say, this is how I'm going to get the insights on the ground floor. What do you think the but when I first met you, I was like, I really connect with this guy. Like, I don't know if it was a spiritual thing. It was like a connective tissue that was just, there was like an unspoken, like connection. And I do think there might be more of like a spiritual side to that, just from a, like, perhaps like work that's not, how much do you think of doing those practices really helped you like see a higher order idea, or like
Yeah.
wave of like where you should be spending your life and your time? Like, tell me more about that.
Yeah, no, I love that question. I've thought it's funny. It's been very topical actually in the last 6 months of my life. And, truthfully, Brian, I think it's interesting. I've kind of gone through this like wave of prioritizing like spirituality in my life in the last 10 years, right? Like in my early 20s, it was a really big deal. Like I would really read a lot of spiritual text. I would try to meditate every day. Um, and I think when I started the company, for better or for worse, I kind of lost that side. I would say the last 7 years, right? I guess maybe just being in the weeds and having so much input thrown at you and the stressors. Not that it's an excuse, but that side of me kind of diminished. And only in the last 6 months, I've kind of reopened that side in me. And I think one thing that I've often thought about is when I reflect on the most creative decisions that we've had at the company, it's often been in spaces of void of thought. So the one-away moment that I shared when we had this idea of becoming leasing agents and working for free and learning and building this relationship with this guy who we knew we could learn a lot from and hopefully become our first investor, it was me sitting in his basement for 45 minutes meditating. When I think about, we'll talk about it later, but we did this 3-month tour where I lived on an RV and we created a podcast studio in the RV and we traveled to all our customers and potential customers and was kind of this crazy N of one experiment. That also came when I was sitting in the sauna, right, with no phone and nothing, just kind of in this absence of void of doing. So, I think there's like, people often talk about making decisions either through data or intuition. I think data, obviously, you're more analytical. And I think intuition, you kind of, there's not a clear like connection to why you're doing things. But I think the step function decisions we made in the company, I feel like I can strongly attribute to this higher order, kind of higher self creative zone that you enter.
So let me ask you a question then. So one, I really resonate with this. It's like, okay, you get intuition or qualitative data points, you lean into that intuition, and then you like look at harder numbers to like tap into that. It's like, okay, a business model, you want to start a new business, you don't just look at the TAM and the model first. It's like intuition leads you into that direction, and maybe you do the math on like what's possible, right? Is kind of what I'm hearing you say. Like, what's allowed you though, like beyond meditation, like what do you think it's taken for you to tap into like a higher self? And then from there, like, how do you think that's guided you, right, to go down, let's just say, I know it was with Zuma, and like, you've clearly like, you've always seemed, you struck me since like we met 2 months ago, like you're tapped into an internal place, but like, what's allowed you to get there and stay there? Obviously meditation, you're talking about them, but there's got to be more to this than just like, yeah, like meditated for 45 minutes and met some guy. Like what are some of the other recipes or ingredients in this recipe for you?
So in the last few weeks, I don't know if you've seen, but Twitter, X has been like, there was this hotly debated topic on introspection. So Mark Andreessen did a podcast with this guy, David Senra. And the one of the first questions David asked him was, what is the role introspection has played in your life? And Mark's take was, I try to do as little introspection as possible. And I really like anytime introspection comes, I avoid it. And it was super contested. Everybody was super upset and people were writing posts. And because his thinking was, his thesis was, if you look back in history, some of the greatest things that, greatest inventions were done by people that did very little introspection. That was his take. And I don't know if I agree. I think like, I'm not as strong on the side of you have to always introspect, and I'm not on the other side, but I think it's a mix of both. I think Mark's take is true, which is if you're constantly introspecting, you're constantly questioning yourself, and you're constantly questioning why you're doing things, and whether you're doing the right thing, or are there things you can improve on. And I think you have to introspect to the degree where you feel like you have the right motivations, you're on the right path. But beyond that, I think you just have to put your head down and go. So I think the answer to your question is, I naturally have been somebody that has introspected a lot, right? Maybe too much, because I question a lot. But I think the opportunity that introspection allows you to do is it allows you to question more deeply things and you and your life, and you can go back and reflect, and then error correct and iterate and change the way you operate. So I would attribute it to introspection. But I say that with an asterisk of like, I think introspection is good, but beyond a certain point, you kind of just have to put your head down and get things done.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think Mark runs a very lucrative top venture fund. Like, I don't think he really gives a shit how much introspection the founder's done. He's like, is this founder going to make me money?
Exactly.
And like, there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think, to your point, like the founder journey is a hard journey. Ideally, the founders pick something that is enduring when shit gets really hard. And perhaps if introspection took them to that moment, like they're maybe a little bit more willing to stay on the path when things do get a little hard. So I mean, to your point, I think it can be, as someone who maybe falls in your camp, maybe less questioning these days on like, am I on the right path? But like still a lot of questioning. I do think it can be healthy, but then sometimes you look at those people who are just so analytical, pragmatic. They just like,
do.
you
Yeah.
just do without like feel. And, I think it's like, what is the right balance? But I think it's a healthier balance to have the duality on both sides.
Yeah. One thing that I've learned, having, we have a podcast through the company, and I've learned that many people, not that it's a good or bad thing, but many people actually don't introspect that much. And you can see it when you ask somebody a question, and you can see in real time that they're actually processing the answer because they hadn't thought about it before. But it's interesting, right? Like a lot of people, I think, especially in Silicon Valley, like they don't introspect, and they're often driven from some sort of like childhood trauma or some sort of toxic event or fuel that's happened in their early years, and that can be quite a powerful source of fuel and quite a powerful source of drive. But I think the question that I ask myself is, I want to build great things, and I want to create massive impact to the world, and at the same time, I don't want that to come at the cost of me. I don't want to self-sacrifice my whole being and be driven from this kind of toxic fuel source. And I think you don't have to. I think some of it will always be there, but I think there's a world in which you can actually be driven more by an abundant fuel source, and toxic fuel source will still be there, but it doesn't have to solely be that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think a lot of entrepreneurs start from a deeper place of pain, and ideally along the way that fuel source becomes more healthy or more clean than dirty. But I think it can have both. What if I was to ask you, like, what is the driver of your fuel source? Like, what is pushing you, and has it been unhealthy / how has it turned healthy? And where is that today?
Yeah, it's changed a lot, honestly. When I first started, I didn't grow up like very financially like secure in any form. When I was younger, a lot of the conversations I felt that we had in our household was around money. Usually the lack of money. I don't know if this is just like, I'm biased because of what I remember, but my experience was just a lot of arguments around money and not having enough money, and why, we don't have money to pay for this. And I think to some degree that created some internal conflict, right? I felt like because I was exposed to so much conflict around money, I think I internalized the idea that um, having money was safety, right? That was one of my beliefs. Having money was what would keep you safe. So when I graduated, because I had this kind of internal belief that like not being financially secure is not feeling safe, my number one goal was to figure out financial security, to solve that problem. Naval has this quote that I really like, but it's the whole point of winning the game is to be free of it. So my thinking was, okay, let me win this game so I can be free of it. Let me solve this problem and I can operate from blank slate. So that was a big source of fuel for me, of just feeling financially insecure, feeling like I didn't want to be reliant on somebody else's decision to fire me or hire me. So that drove me quite a bit of trying to get this financial freedom. And over time, I think that's changed a lot because I realized that the goalpost always keeps moving. You're never going to be like, oh, and now I'm finally financially secure, or now I'm finally happy. It just keeps changing. And I think because it keeps changing, it led me to believe that I don't know if that's a worthy goal. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For the longest time in my 20s, my not number one goal, but my focus was to get to the top, right? Which was self-actualization. And self-actualization at the top of Maslow's needs is basically becoming the best version of yourself, right? But many people don't know that he actually authored in a new hierarchy on top of that, like 7 years later, and it's called self-transcendence. Um, and when I think about my fuel source and motivation source, so much of it has been around me and trying to get me to a good place. And I am now entering this new phase where, because I want to transition my fuel source and I want to be more generative, I want to get into self-transcendence and figure out how I can create impact and drive by actual contribution. So it's changing. I wouldn't say it's fully changed.
Would you say transcendence is above actualization?
Yeah, yeah. So self-actualization, I think by the way he's defined it as like you're actualizing yourself. So it's really you are at the center of it. You need to become the best version of you. Self-transcendence is you're transcending the self. So you're starting to operate in a way outside of you and trying to serve truly. And that was never my mental model, if I'm being completely honest, in my 20s. It was really around fear of me not having enough, fear of me being financially insecure. And I was at the center of that. And I think and something just doesn't sit well with me about that. It doesn't feel generative, and I'm trying to transition out of that.
So, so transcendence is, to your point of view, generative and making more contribution impact beyond yourself.
Exactly.
All right. So connect like your spiritual like pursuits, right, to like where you are in a more tangible form today. Like for those that don't know Shiv, like let's just say you are already more of an actualized state at your age than you would have thought. You realize there's another mountain perhaps that like ultimately you want to cross, but where in like tangible form, where is Shiv in life and what's brought you here?
And when you say tangible form, you mean what do you mean by that?
Like what's the day in the life of Shiv right now that's maybe put you in an actualized state? What is Shiv doing in the world? And what is it going to take to ultimately move to a more place of transcendence?
Yeah. So I mean, we can talk about. I can maybe start off a little bit about what we even do right now, which during COVID we had a strong pivot. So we had built this business where we would basically, as I mentioned, arbitrage. We would rent out apartments, we would guarantee the landlord rent, and then we would sublet them to business travelers and leisure travelers. It was very kind of a simple business, and that got completely destroyed by COVID. And we ended up basically going from this kind of profitable business to burning $100,000 a month. We had no, like, you can imagine what happens during COVID, but we had all these leases, nobody was traveling, and we still were on the hook to pay this rent. So we ended up basically finding ourselves in this extreme crisis where we went from having infinite runway to 3 months of runway. And we pivoted the entire company, and we basically built the early version of today's product, which is an AI leasing agent that helps kind of schedule tours and automates mundane work. We had 35 properties that were all vacant, and we needed to lease them as quickly as possible. So we built this AI agent that would schedule tours and automate all the communication, because when we were trying to schedule these tours, we would find ourselves answering the same questions over and over again. So we would schedule these tours, and in 2 months, we got most of the properties leased. We broke out of leases where we could, and we kind of were sitting with no business. And we realized, kind of reflecting on the last few months, that there's so much manual work that exists in property management. And the problem that we were facing was a problem that everybody else was facing, because you'd spend all this money. If you're a property manager and you manage, let's say, 5,000 apartments, you're spending a lot of money advertising. You're getting in a lot of leads, but there's a huge bottleneck at the top of the funnel because you don't have the manpower or the resources to respond to every lead, follow up with every lead, and convert that into a scheduled tour. So that kind of gave us insight to build the business we're doing today. We started it in 2021, shortly after COVID, and a few years before the kind of ChatGPT moment. And yeah, so that's kind of what we focus on today, is building out an agentic workforce that helps automate a lot of the manual work in property management.
Wow. Okay. So let me just replay back to you what I think I heard. You almost went out of the business. Then you started burning $100,000 a month. You were almost on the brink. You dug a little deeper. You said, look, there's still a major problem here. I'm a real estate agent. I'm flooded with so many leads. There's no way in the world I can reply to them. Yeah, it's all the ChatGPT moment. You got in front of the moment a bit, and you're like, okay, what's an agentic workforce look like? As replying for real estate agents, so they can make as much money as possible for different leads that come through the door. Fair?
Exactly. Yeah. Except it's less real estate agents and it's more like leasing larger. So we serve institutional management companies. So like a management company that manages, 1,000 units on the lower end to 30,000 units. So in service of the leasing agent that's on site. But yeah, exactly.
Well, like, would Compass be a client or customer?
Yeah, exactly. So Compass would not be a client. So a client would be like Greystar, if you've heard of them. They're a big management company. And then we are helping out the on-site leasing team. So if you have a 300 unit apartment building, you'll usually have, 3 leasing agents on site. And we kind of serve as the digital workforce that helps do a lot of the digital work so that the on-site team can focus on building out that in-person relationship with a prospect.
Okay, got it. Makes a lot of sense what you're doing. And then, I want to talk a little bit. You have some fun things on this journey, from, this nationwide epic podcast tour you did in a van, which we'll get to. But let's just say when things were on the brink, right? And you went from making some money or a little bit of money to, oh, fuck, we're burning $100,000 a month. Like, what made you keep going when probably it would have been just pretty easy to quit? Why'd you keep going?
Yeah. Honestly, that was the lowest point of one of the lowest points in my life, because we had built. It is so hard to start something, right? When I think people don't realize that when you're going from like nothing to like the first version of something, there's so much momentum and force required to activate something from nothing. And to have that kind of in days, literally days, crumble is pretty jarring. I think a perfect analogy or story is you listen to Brian Chesky talk about what happened to Airbnb. Obviously, that's orders of magnitude bigger, but it was very similar in terms of what the experience was. So I think there's a couple things, right? In that moment, There was definitely a period of time, honestly, for like a month or two, we didn't know what to do because we were like, the thing that I knew immediately was once we run out of money, we're dead. So the thing that we have to do is we can't run out of money. So what is not running out of money? It's stopping the bleeding because we were burning all this money. So we had to get out of the leases and we had to rent these apartments long term. So that was the first thing. There was no hesitation. There was no, I was just like, every day we're burning money and we just need to be militant about solving this problem because nothing else is needed at that point. So that was the first thing. So honestly, the first 2 months we were just executing, like figuring out how to get out of these leases, getting it rented. That was like the only thing that mattered. I think once we had solved that problem and we were at neutral, we entered this lull where I was like, I don't really know what to do. We didn't really know what to do. And I think when people say you should have a co-founder, I think that this is why. Because there are these very fragile moments in a company where all it takes is for you to say, I don't want to do this anymore. And if you decide to do that, your company ceases to exist. And I think when you have a co-founder and you have somebody who is truly in the trenches with you and understands play by play, moment by moment, what the experience is, it really, really helps, right? It's obviously having a co-founder split the work in the early days is great, but I think the real value is in these nuclear moments, in these crucible moments where everything can change and you just need somebody there with you, stride by stride emotionally. So I think that was number one, the biggest thing that helped is we were in it together. And truthfully, number two is like, I don't know what else we would have done. I don't know if we had a better option. And I think like part of it was like, could we kind of reinvent ourselves? So yeah, I mean, it was super hard emotionally. There were many times where I wanted to just get a job and quit or figure out something. But I think having a co-founder to support was really impactful.
You know, it's ironic. Your name is Zuma. And it almost implies like zoom, zoom, you know, like you were being thrusted from behind to go forward. So might be the spiritual significance of this name of the company. No, man, look, I resonate a lot with all of it and then some, you know, and I think picking a partner in a business is critical. You can do it very wrong, you can do it right, you can do it both, you know, it just depends how many shots you can give yourself. So um,
It's so funny. I'll say one thing, Brian, that I think is fascinating. In college, I was obsessed with one of my favorite books of all time is this book called Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb, who's an economist and writes these great books, Black Swan, Anti-Fragile, Fooled by Randomness. And the whole concept of being anti-fragile is there's three states, right? There's fragile, there's robust, and there's anti-fragile. For the longest time, people thought before he kind of coined this term, the opposite of fragility was robustness, right? So fragile means if you introduce stress into a system, it breaks. Robust means if you introduce stress to the system, it kind of, it endures. And the idea of being anti-fragile is like the more stress you induce into a system, the stronger the thing becomes. So I just became very obsessed with this idea because I was like, well, the world is random. You can't control things. So the best thing you can do is figure out how to be anti-fragile. He also talks about this concept called a black swan event, which is basically an event that is extremely low likelihood to happen, but it's catastrophic. And I remember reading about this and then having actually gone through a true black swan event. I was like, this is so ironic because we didn't plan for this, and it almost just like destroyed our business. So anyway, I thought I'd just share that because it was fascinating to me.
yeah, I really like, I mean, I think to your point, the more stress you introduce into a system, the stronger it gets if the system maybe doesn't incur a black swan event. And what I think you're saying is we survived and got a lot stronger through the process. Is that?
Yeah, and like also the business model we chose was just very fragile because we were taking on these leases. We were paying rent no matter whether somebody rented or not. So it's just funny to me because you can theoretically know something, but oftentimes that doesn't like reflect in your business. But
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so. I mean, look, I made similar mistake like early on. I mean, I was super blind to the business model. I was like, oh, it's all gonna work out. It's all gonna kick. And then you look back and you're like, what the hell are you thinking sometimes, right? And then you play catch up for a while, and then it's like you fight for breathing room, right? But it's like that roundabout process. You just learn so much, and had you not gone in that direction, like you wouldn't have the lessons to see what you can see now. So that's cool. So so tell us, it's 2026, it's March. You replied to a cold LinkedIn from me about, prop tech founders, and we built this wonderful friendship that's been very fun and random and covers all sorts of topics outside of work. But where is where's the life of Shiv and Zuma today? Like, where's the business? Like, we've made up a lot of ground since 2022 or three, but tell us what's going on.
yeah, no, it's been awesome. It's been really cool. I think having started a little bit prior to like the whole ChatGPT moment, it's definitely been a meaningful advantage for us. Just we work in real estate and property management, and part of the effectiveness of our tool is kind of being deeply integrated with these larger property management software systems, right? So like RealPage and Yardi and MRI and Entrata, and building out kind of these deep, sophisticated integrations with them takes time. So it's been great to kind of have those multiple years of working with them and partnering with them and building out these integrations. But today it's been awesome. I think we're so close to our customers. One way our philosophy in building product, and you can see from our origin story, is people talk about making something people want or talking to users or talking to customers, and I think that's okay. But I think the order of magnitude more effective version of this is actually like becoming the customer, right? Knowing through and through what they actually feel like. So when we build products, one of the things we'll do is we'll actually fly to one of our customers' offices and effectively move there for a period of weeks or months and actually work alongside them in their office and iterate. So as a result of operating that way, we've been able to launch a lot of new products. We have a rent collections agent that helps facilitate one of the most painful parts and most dangerous parts of a leasing agent. Oftentimes residents will come down and physically threaten or abuse the on-site team because they're kind of asking them to pay rent, and their name is tied to that. So the fact that we kind of automate a lot of that for them it has been really meaningful to our customers. So we have a rent collections agent, we have the leasing agent, we have a voice AI agent. And our goal is to continue to kind of identify these painful, time-consuming workflows and automate as much of it so people can focus on what they do best and care about most naturally, which is usually kind of in-person human connection and human interaction.
Keeping people on the sales floor.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Building out the relationship.
Yeah, for sure. So, like, okay, let's say it's a day in the life of using Zuma. I'm a real estate agent. Like, walk me through in the most simple terms what happens. Like, give me the magical product experience that you've created, and if I'm a real estate agent, what to expect, when I have my hands on your product.
Yeah. So, okay. So the way it works right now is, let's say you're a leasing agent, right? And what your primary like responsibility is, you come in on a Monday and you're at your desk, and one of your most important goals is to figure out how to take this like army of leads that have just flooded your inbox from all these different sources, from your website, from Zillow, from apartments.com, and take these kind of unstructured leads and structure it into qualified apartment tours. And I think that, like, if you think about this, it's actually a very time consuming and mundane process because not all leads are qualified. Many of them are spam leads. You have to go through, follow up with them and figure out how to convert them. So what we do is we basically have integrated into our customers' workflows. So a leasing agent will open up their laptop, they'll log into their property management software system, and they'll start working through their leads. Just as you have a user in like Salesforce, let's say, Brian, you have Salesforce and you have your own user profile. We'll have a similar user profile called Kelsey. And that's the name of our AI. So Kelsey will be a user in that system. We'll be engaging with leads, following up with leads. We'll integrate to all the systems that exist in your world and use that unstructured data to fuel responses to questions that leads have. So we automate that whole process. We automate all the follow-up. And the impact to the leasing agent is instead of kind of coming in, looking at their inbox, going through all these leads, following up, they come in, they open up their calendar, and they just see the tours that have already been scheduled on their calendar with the summary of the conversation, a summary of their needs. And that leasing agent then just focuses on mastering the in-person relationship and creating the in-person relationship. So that's the kind of the happy journey. But our goal is like, we don't want people to be doing busy work. I don't know anybody that loves to do work that is like de-energizing and repetitive and mundane. So like, why would humans do that? It doesn't make sense. But to build a quality relationship on a tour and ask about their life and whether they have dogs and build a true relationship, it has huge impact on whether the person decides to move into an apartment or not. And that's what people should be focused on doing, is our belief and core thesis.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. I'm also, I'm glad that you've built Kelsey, and I feel like she's making the life of these real estate agents much more frictionless, and she seems like a great camper on, the shoulder, making this possible. So it's cool. I'll have to check out the product sometime. And
Yeah. I mean, I have a personal story. I mean, another big motivator for me to do this is after I graduated, I lived in the Bay Area for a few years, and then the South Bay, and then in 2019, 2020 moved to San Francisco. And I was just so deep into work that I found a few places. I didn't really do any tours. I found a place that seemed like it was cheaper than market rent, that was nice enough, and kind of just signed a lease. Me and my co-founder lived together. And that had such a drastically negative experience on my life in San Francisco. It was this place in Market, where is it, on Harrison Street, and it was mid-COVID, and it was terrible to just walk around and dirty, and it just had such a big impact on me. And part of the reason I just kind of signed that lease is I would reach out to all these people, I'd call them on Zillow, and they just wouldn't get back to me. So I was like, fuck this, I'm just gonna like sign a lease with the person that's responding because I don't have time to deal with this.
It impacts, and so what you're saying is it not just impacts the real estate agent, but it impacts the person on the other end of it.
100%, because like I want to find the best place for me, but I don't have the time to follow up with you like multiple times. Like that's just ridiculous. It's like I'm trying to come and tour, and that's the experience for a lease for a renter. You'll go on Zillow and you'll try to call them or contact them, and you won't get a response. So it's like I'm not gonna, and maybe other people spend more time now. I live in LA now, and I did like 15 tours. I spent a lot of time on this process because I didn't want to get it wrong. I realized how much where you live impacts your mental state and your experience of life. So it has a huge impact. So I think it's honestly both equally impactful for the renter and for the leasing team.
Yeah. Well, it's the silver lining in this that's kind of screwed up is if your San Francisco experience was better, you wouldn't have left me.
Exactly. And that's honestly a truthful statement. I mean, part of it is when we first started hiring, most of the team was in LA for some reason. And it just happened. We would go there every month, and I was contrasting my experience in San Francisco. And I was like, well, if all the team is in LA, I don't like San Francisco. Why should I? Maybe we should just move to LA. So part of it was because the team was already there, but it's true. It has a huge impact on your experience in a city, where you live, your quality of life. And if you can't do the tours that you want to do and see the properties that you want to do because people are not getting back to you, it is a frustrating experience for the renter.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, beach in Santa Monica, Market Street in San Francisco. It's yeah, I'm giving you a hard time, but I can see why you made your decision. And I also understand the problem at large. And I think what's nice to know is you're seeing the problem on both sides. You're seeing the problem as on the agent side, you're also seeing it on the renter side. And okay, if I can create a better solution, indirectly I can solve both sides in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
Amazing. Okay, so one of the things I want to ask you about is I remember I was walking outside in my beautiful neighborhood in North Beach, and I was just chatting with you, and you were telling me about this epic podcast tour that you went in person in a van around the country, and I listened to you. I'm like, this guy is so cool. Tell us what you learned from that, what was the inspiration, and just a little bit about the experience.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So the reason that kind of came about, I told you the impulse thought was when we did when I was in the sauna and I was like just thinking, and I kind of had this idea. And there's a few reasons why we decided to do this. Number one, Charlie Munger talks about this idea of playing games where you have like a competitive advantage, right? He says that he only tries to find games that he plays where he has a competitive advantage. And when I was thinking about this, I was like, okay, we're kind of a relatively early stage startup. We can't hire, 24 salespeople. We can't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars at a conference. So we effectively can't beat the competition in a game where we are going to lose because we don't have the resources to win. So my thinking was, well, what can we do in a way that is playing our own game, and win where we have a competitive advantage. So I kind of started thinking from first principles. I was like, okay, what do I feel like I'm naturally good at, right? I really enjoy talking to people. I really enjoy having genuine conversations. I genuinely enjoy learning about people's lives. So, and I've loved podcasts ever since they first came out, right? That was my main source of fuel. That's the reason why I left my job to start a company and all this stuff. I took inspiration from podcasts. So I was like, okay, well, I love podcasts. And then I was like, okay, well, I love doing it in person. I think building kind of this in-person relationship over a deep, genuine conversation just feels much more authentic to me. And then I was like, okay, well, how do I do that on scale? Because everybody doesn't live in California. Our customers are around the country. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe we can do an RV thing. And then I was like, what would get a lot of attention? So we kind of I took all of those ingredients together and basically kind of generated this idea of building, renting an RV, wrapping it in our Zuma logo, and building a whole marketing campaign around it. So we spent 3 months on the road, went to 20 different states, and basically built this podcast studio in the RV. So we would go to Texas or Dallas and message a bunch of customers and people and get intros and have them meet us at the RV park and do these podcasts. But I thought what was interesting to me was, people think about, especially when you're doing enterprise sales, right? The relationship is really important. If it's a SMB sale or something small, it doesn't matter as much. But when you're trying to get somebody to commit to hundreds of thousands of dollars of spend, the relationship really matters. So my thinking was, well, how can I get people to know me, and how can I build a genuine relationship with them? And then from there, see if there's a business opportunity versus approaching them with the business opportunity and then building the relationship. Because let's say my gripe was this is an example. Let's say you go to a conference, right? And there's the CEO of a large company that you want to sell to. How many people at that conference are going to that CEO, trying to talk to them, trying to get their time? The market dynamics are just not in your favor, right? You don't have an advantage. So my thinking was, well, would somebody rather, take time to go on a sales call or would they rather have do a podcast and like get to and have a unique experience? And it was just obvious that it was the second. So I mean, we've gotten like massive customers from it. We built a lot of great relationships. And it's just given me, I mean, you might know this too, but I just feel like now I'm like 1 or 2 degrees away from like anybody in the industry, right? Because there's somebody I know that I've either recorded with that can connect me to anybody. So it's really helped with real revenue that we've gotten. It's also helped with product innovation because I have this roster of like great companies and customers that I can just call and pitch an idea to or share, ask to see how products are working on their end. And it's been tremendous to just have this like corpus of relationships that we can leverage.
I like that corpus of relationships as a byproduct of doing a show and driving around the country to do it. And you're wearing a hat that I think says free spirit. Is that correct?
It does, yeah. How did you read that? Yeah.
I did. I saw it. I was like, oh, this is fitting for your free spirit sauna inspiration to podcast to customers. I also like what you said a lot about building the relationship first and then the transaction second. I think we're wired similarly. And I distinctly remember, we've been doing on the SMB side, on the smaller side with the podcast. As we get our enterprise, layer going, I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about doing it in person, but it makes so much sense to like travel and be on the road for what we're trying to do. So it seems like you figured out how to master that in a nice way. So I've taken some notes from Shiv. Shiv, we're closing in on time here. This has been amazing. What's one thing I'm not asking you that I should be asking you, or one thing you want to give light to before we close out the conversation to bring us home?
So one of my favorite thinkers is this guy called Naval, and most people know him. It almost sounds trite to say you like the way he thinks, but I like the way he thinks. And one thing he said on a podcast that really struck me as being true is people don't spend enough time thinking about what they should be doing. And they just do it. So if I'm going to start a company and that company is going to take 10 years of my life, why do I only spend a couple months thinking about it or even less? And his whole thesis is like, you should spend a meaningful amount of time thinking about what you're doing and the problem you want to work on, because that has a huge impact on the value you can create in the world. So I think something that surprised me on the upside is just spend a lot of time. Like there's this, Silicon Valley like philosophy of like just doing and getting things done and moving, and all that is true. But I think picking the right problem to work on is almost more important than just like doing. So I think it's really important to spend a lot of time actually thinking about what problem you want to work on, why you want to work on it, and don't just like jump into something, but have deep thought around what you're doing.
Yeah. We're the same person. I like it. No, I mean, look, I think a lot of people do feel this. I was having this conversation the other day about Silicon Valley is so heady and people just want to ego drop who they're working for, but they don't give a lot of thought to like how they connect to it. And they wake up in 10 years and they're like, what the hell was I doing trying to chase these titles? I remember when I was in college, I was doing these ticket sales programs for the Hawks and Braves. I was like built these like 6-figure marketing and sales programs across like 9 campuses, and I was connecting student groups and fraternities and sororities and date nights to ticket sales with philanthropy, and like we had this whole system that finally cracked. And I remember like after we did tons of sales, and it was like, okay, I started to look out, and I'm like, to what end? I'm like, do I want to just be in a corner office making $500K selling tickets when I'm 33 years old? And I was looking at the guy who was like a mentor at the time, who was sitting in the corner office in the revenue position. And I'm like, that looks miserable. And like it hit me like this is not the path for my life. And like I'd worked in sports all throughout college and I was like, I'm done. And it was so easy to let go of. Anyways, to your point, I think that takes introspection. That takes kind of looking at yourself in the mirror and having really hard conversations, saying this isn't for me, and being okay like letting it go. So, I resonate a lot with what you're saying, Shiv. This has been an absolutely stellar conversation. And where can people find you, Zuma, Shiv? Tell us.
Yeah. I mean, LinkedIn is probably the best place. So Shiv, Gettu, Gettu, LinkedIn, and our website is getzuma.com. But yeah, no, this has been awesome, Brian. Thank you for having me, and thanks for asking a pretty wide variety of questions. I feel like we've covered the spiritual stuff and the business stuff. But one thing I will add as a resource to anybody interested is, I think, on the last question that Brian asked me, the essay by Paul Graham, How to Do Great Work, I think is a phenomenal resource to really understand, like, if you want to do great work, what are the prerequisites to that. So I would just leave you guys with that resource.
Yeah. Yeah. You forgot that's a great essay. The Struggle by Ben Horowitz is another one I'd recommend. And then you forgot your most important social handle, which I think about all the time, which is get on my level. Like get on
my Instagram, get to my level is my
level.
last.
So I'm constantly posting and I'm thinking about, should I tag Shiv's account about getting on a specific performance level? And so you've inspired my posting at times. So I should say thank you live before we wrap. So thank you.
Love it.
Cool. All right, dude. Well, look, we'll talk to you soon. And thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.